we can go ahead and just get rolling with some of the top level portion of this topic that really it kind of grew out of, and Ashley, I'm not calling you out specifically, but I really appreciate you recommending that we do something like this. I know that when you see something like role play, it's really not role play. I wanted to really make this a little bit more interactive, since we're over video. That doesn't jive as well as a traditional listing presentation, mock, or a dress rehearsal, skill building session, whatever it is that you want to call it. I just wanted it to be a little bit more interactive, but I wanted to try and keep it in the lane of prior experience, a few ideas to help place that listing presentation or the home selling proposal in a framework of, here's where we're going to keep this thing while we're driving in between the lines, and how we can actually accomplish the real goal, which is winning the business, right? I mean, can we all agree that there's really one goal, and it's to win the business? But if it's not in the cards, if the situation is not ideal, the client's not ideal, this, that, and the other, what we want to do is have a framework to be able to flesh out, on the flip side, if it might be something that we might not want to enter into, right? So it's for us to figure out what the best possible outcome is, to chart a path going forward, whether it's get the listing, tell them good luck, I wish you all the best, or to make a new plan and come back another day. So first and foremost, really just to open it up for everyone here that's on the call, what in your experience, now we've got all across the spectrum from been there, done that to fresh out of the box, right? So what has been your experience thus far in listing presentations as far as the main questions that a seller either wants to ask or objects to right off the bat? Don't all talk at once. So what are the main or most common things that you hear out of a seller's mouth or a prospective seller's mouth in regards to why choose me, why choose this company, why list exclusively?
I'll go ahead and jump in first.
Yes, Lisa.
I've only had one listing appointment. I got the listing. Their biggest thing.
Thank you for admitting that, Lisa.
They, from the beginning, wanted to sign the papers no matter what, and their reason was they liked our sign. All the other signs in the neighborhood were little cheap. They weren't nice signs at all, and they liked our sign. And that they were my buyer clients, and they had to list. So I said, let's sit down and talk about it. So it was kind of, I was like shooting in a barrel. So, but I'm here to listen to other experiences and get information.
Great. Did they have any objection to anything at all, or
nothing?
They
didn't even, when I told them, and I don't know if I'm supposed to say this, but I went right in at 6%, and they didn't even, nothing. I showed them, I went heavy on my advertising. It was more or less, they wanted to just sign the paperwork right there. And I was like, I wasn't ready to put the listing in yet because I had none of the information. So right. I said, let's slow down. I'm going to come in for another meeting and measure the house and all that stuff. And, but yeah, they were ready to go. So it was kind of, I don't know, handed to me, I guess. Okay. I didn't have to work for it. Let's put it that way.
Well, that's nice. It's nice to be able to do that once in a while, but we're happy to have you on. And I hope you get some pieces of value out of today's session. I'm going to try to keep this. I know that Ashley has a hard out at 10:45, so I'm going to keep my eye on the clock. If my eye keeps darting to the right, it's because I'm looking at the clock. So, Tracy's leaving.
Oh, he's coming right back. Okay. What I was going to say is we are going to do a teletherapy today anyway, so I'm just going to have to get Ridge lined on, and then we're good. So I don't have to leave physically.
Okay.
And
Okay.
thank you for doing this. Thank you.
No problem. Okay, so just to kind of go around whomever wants to bring up a topic before I get rolling, because once I get rolling, it's kind of hard for me to stop. Any specific issues or questions or seller objections, situations that you would like to hear covered? Or is there any topic in particular that you've had trouble with in the past that you'd like for me to specifically dialogue with today?
I think go ahead, Lindsay.
Sorry.
No, you go ahead.
I think one of the things that we're seeing now, and it's more of a question, are commissions, because more people more realtors are cutting their commissions. So really showing the sellers what you're getting and reinforcing that. So any helpful hints and tips you have to help us reinforce why we earn the, well, it's 6%, but 3 and 3. And I know me personally, I have cut my commission, but I never do typically on the buy side. I don't think that's fair to a buyer's agent. So covering that, because it seems to be happening more and more.
Yeah, and that's fair. Lindsay, I think I'll jump in real quick, and then we'll get to Brandy's point in just a second, but I'll jump in real quick, especially with that. I'll get to something here in just a minute that really I didn't make it up. I took it completely away from another, interestingly, a child psychologist. And it's about turning bad news into good news. And essentially it's worst case scenario, most likely scenario, best case scenario, walking the seller through that, but on their own terms, asking them, okay, after we go through all this stuff, so now after everything that I've told you, and you and I still kind of have a little disconnect, it seems to be on fee, what's the worst case scenario here? What's the most likely thing to happen? And then, well, then what's the best case scenario? Well, more than likely, you just disarm the seller to the point where they go, well, then we're going to get this and this and this and this, and then move on to future, as opposed to, well, this other guy said he was going to charge me 1%. And isn't that ridiculous? That's so crazy. I can't believe that they charge 1%. How do they even do business? Quick question for you, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. What exactly do you understand about how commissions work? Because in the real estate industry, we have what is called a cooperating broker policy, in which we cooperate with buyers agents just the same as I am representing buyers, and I get cooperated with by selling agents. When the person says he's going to charge you 1%, did you actually know that more than likely it's not going to be 1, it's going to be 3, or it's going to be 4? Because they're going to offer a buyer's agent a cooperating fee. It's exactly the way that Compass gets you every single time. Just from our perspective, it's exactly the way they say, yeah, I'll do it for 1%. Oh, by the way, you owe a buyer's agent 3 too. Find me somebody that does it for 1% flat, and I will whistle Dixie with my pants off. Sorry to be off color. That's the truth. There's reality, and then there's smoke and mirrors, right? And if somebody's going to say 1% flat fee, $500, you look at MLS and there's a cooperating buyer's agent fee in there. There never, not once, is there something that doesn't include a buyer's agent fee in there, and it looks pretty darn enticing. It's not $0 or $400 or whatever it is. It's a traditional buyer's agent fee. They just trim all the fat off of what really is a marketing, negotiating, and selling plan from the way that the listing agent does their business. Lindsay, we used to be able to go up with my service is better. Now we have to deal with not only misinformation, but people that just, quite frankly, don't know what their value representation is, and don't understand or don't have it articulated to them as a seller on why it's good for them to sell their house, even though it's not just sunshine and lollipops, right? So thank you for that. I will I will address that slightly, but it's one of those, it's one of those magical questions, you know, really those upfront objections, especially about commission. You know, I have a friend who's an agent who said that they would do it for 4. Well, I hate to ask this, but how quickly did that happen? Did they really try and work back and forth with you, or did they just say, you know what, I'm your friend, I'm going to lay down? If he's going to lay down for a friend, what's he going to do for somebody else? I fight for my clients. And as a result, let's get out the books and let's see who's so-and-so. Let's look at our average list of sold price. And let's see, would you rather get 96.4% or 98.9%? So if we're talking about 5% versus 4%, guess what? If the price goes down, so does my commission. If I don't get you the most for your home, I take home less. There's a lot of ways to handle it, but you know, I think that if for what it's worth, proving the value on the front end is the best way to go about just saying, the most important thing for you is figuring out what your expectations are, why you actually need to move. The expectation is the motivation. Uncovering the real needs versus the wants, like we want to get X of a price, or we want to do this or that or the other. And then chart a path going forward. It doesn't have to be frou-frou. It doesn't have to be painted in a negative light. It just is a path going forward with options. Deliver the options to a seller, and then create some new expectations, and then deliver on those promises. Whether it's marketing or constant communication, whatever that might be, a lot of those things then help dilute that commission objection, just because now we're saying, here's all the stuff that we get, and as a result, we sell homes for, on average, a higher price from list to sold in fewer amount of time with a less amount of trouble. So does that make sense to you? And if not, what do you want me to take off the table here? And I'm more than happy to negotiate with you, because commission is always negotiable. It's a fee for service. And so if we want to jostle around some of these services, I'm more than happy to do so. But what I really want to do is accomplish your needs right now. So there's a million different things, but I think that just asking more questions and being more curious. I've heard up and down. I've heard a million different ways about handling objections, and I think that handling objections is a difficult thing, because our day and age, we've transitioned slightly from just selling in the traditional sense to selling being much more of an empathetic exercise. And if you can be empathetic and also curious at the same time, which led me to asking that question, when a seller brought up a commission objection, it was, well, I mean, just tell me what you understand about commission. And I wish that I had a dollar bill, but I used to do this thing with a dollar bill and tear the dollar bill into 18 different little pieces, of which that says, here's who I share with the buyer. And then all of a sudden, here's my half a dollar bill. And I take this piece because that's for E&O insurance. I take this piece. Oh, by the way, you said you wanted all that marketing, so I'm going to take that off. And then I said, this is what I actually take home. You get to sell your house for the most amount of money in the least amount of time with the least amount of problems. And as much of a waste of a dollar bill as that is, the dollar bill can take a hit if I'm going to get a listing. You can do it the exact same way with your hands and go, well, there's the rest of it. And then this little piece right here goes to there. And it, you could run into trouble doing your hand, but depending on which finger goes where, but you never know. You might want to actually do that to somebody that might be a tough pickle. But it's, at the end of the day, it's empathy, but it's also practice in understanding that you're there to help the other person get out of their own way. And more often than not, the main objections are commission, price, and timing, right? I mean, that's it. There's really nothing else. And those three things are a byproduct of something else that we don't yet understand. So a real effective listing presentation doesn't have a whole lot of bells and whistles. And, despite the fact that I think that using the listing presentation, the home selling guide that we put together, the more simplified version of it, really does help you in that regard. It's all about understanding more what the client's real motivation is, what their expectations are, and to merge those things with reality. That's really where we're to come in on that. I hope that remotely answered your question, Lindsay. Sorry. Brandy, you had something you were going to say.
That was I actually had kind of like a 3-part question. That was one of them, so that's good. The other one, I'm sure you're going to cover this, but the other one is, I'm just really interested to see the best way to talk with a potential seller about if you don't feel confident or comfortable in taking the listing, like how we handle that. But then also, the one time we talked about in the office about pricing a home, and you talked about unicorn versus where everything else comps, and then comping it at let's make them fight for it. And how do you, I'm still also very new to the game, so I have very limited experience, but how do you really converse with a seller who is dead set on that unicorn pricing, or maybe even a little higher than the unicorn pricing?
Yeah. And, the answer to all that, there's really no answer other than being dead sure in the amount of research that you've done for that home. Something that worked for me in the past, I'm not saying that this is a magic bullet, but I'm not going to say play dumb, but I'm going to say get on the same page with them, right? The seller is convinced that their house is worth X, right? And so the question to ask in that situation, and it's one of the questions that I'll go through in this, but I think this might be pretty beneficial for us to be a little bit more interactive on the front end, and then we can go through some things to take notes with on the back end, is to ask the seller in that situation, well, we want to get X out of the home. We had a specific number in mind, whatever that might be. You know what? Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I would love to sell your house for $640,000. I'm curious though, since that number is or $640,326. That would be great. I would love to. Just curious. It's a pretty specific number. What's your experience with pricing homes for sale? And I hope you noticed that I just sort of sat there, right? Really, honestly, because everybody knows this, right? The best idea that anyone's ever had is an idea that they never had, but they felt like they came up with it on their own, right? That's what a listing presentation is all about. It's for us to help guide them into making good decisions. They're going to make a decision no matter what.
Yes.
But we have to guide them into making a good decision. Like, they all think they're experts, but yet for some reason or another, we're at the table as a licensed professional. So it's our job to be the professional and help them really figure out what the rules of the game are and how to go forward the best thing for them. So in that situation, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I'm just really curious, what's your experience with pricing a home? Now, the answer might be, we've sold 10 different houses and blah, 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 and whatever that might be. That's great. Okay, I'm curious. Tell me some more about that. What were those homes? How did that process go, et cetera? Or they might just, more often than not have a real good answer, or come up with some sort of flabbergasted response to it, an excuse about, well, I mean, so we paid for it, and then so-and-so down the street sold their house for this, that, and the other. And I was like, that's great. That's interesting. Why don't we do this? which, you know, granted, I'm a very low tech person anyways, but now in today's day and age, you can carry with you the laptop or the tablet or whatever it is. And you can be like, well, that's cool. Why don't we do this? I think this will be pretty fun. Let's go in and look at the MLS and look at that solds and look at the pictures and let's check it out. And then all of a sudden that house that sold for $640 and they want to try and sell the house for $660. And all of a sudden you get in there and you find that there's a 300 bottle climate controlled wine cellar and a pool and a brass monkey that was blessed by the Dalai Lama or some such thing. Or you get in there and look and you say, well, I mean, from a buyer's perspective, how do you feel about this home compared to yours? I'm not saying that's the answer, but it's the start of a conversation of, okay, well, really, what's your experience in selling homes? And then you can ground it back to, well, my experience, because this is what I do for a living, is I want to get my clients the most for their home that the market will allow in the least amount of time with the least amount of worry. Here's my process. And if this doesn't make good business sense to you, I'm more than happy to hear out what your process is. That may seem a little forward for some people, but really it's getting down to the truth. We need to get 400,000 out of this house or whatever it is, rather than saying why, because you know where that question's going to go. You know what the answer is going to be out of that. It's, I'm really curious what's your experience with pricing these, because I've got kind of a specific system and I'd love to show you how we did it. Do you have an extra 5 or 10 minutes, or are there 7 other realtors coming in here to interview for this listing as well? Because I don't want to waste your time and I sure as heck don't want to waste mine. And then walk them through the more than likely that scenario is going to play out as so-and-so down the street sold their house for Y. And this person down there sold their house for X, and it's nowhere near as nice as mine. When's the last time you've been in it? Because it is $30,000 for the renovations. You know, that's how you could just at least open a further conversation to showcase how much work you've already put in on the front end to help accurately price their home. And the sole reason why we price homes and put so much work into them is because it's not just to pick a number out of thin air or say what Zillow's economist said it was on a Zestimate. It's to expose the home to the most buyers, but also the most seasoned agents. If the home's overpriced, the buyer's going to look at it and go, it's overpriced. You want to know who's going to say it's overpriced first? Agents. And it's our duty to promote this house to the most buyers and agents online and offline. I can control what that price is when we input it into MLS. I cannot control what some other agent says across town about, oh yeah, you don't want to, you can go in there, that's way overpriced. They got that house down the street was way nicer and it sold for 10,000 less. You know, you can go in there and make a low ball offer. You wonder why that stuff happens? That's it. It's about not letting that scenario play out before it has a chance to let it play out. Well, I think those are, I think those are 2 amazing questions, honestly, because quite literally right now, what are we running up with right now in a lower inventory market with still relatively high buyer demand? We're going to be fighting for listings if we haven't been already, because we have been. And quite frankly, I don't think that anything that would be within our marketing package, I don't think there's any objection that any seller can give outside of, I just get a better vibe from X person, Y person, Z person. And quite frankly, if just to suspend disbelief, if you could take a couple of these little nuggets away from what I'm going to give you a little loose framework of how to present this listing presentation, I don't think there's a chance that you're not going to connect in a proper way with a seller. Does that make sense? Okay, so I really tried to put this into words because, you know, for a long time, I've just used what came out of my gut and I refined over time in a listing presentation. But the long story short is that even though we have this listing presentation, right? When you go on the door, and oh, by the way, you should do that. Don't ring the doorbell. There's a good tip. Knock on the door, don't ring the doorbell. And once you knock on the door, take a couple steps back. You don't want to be Jehovah's Witness up in there going, in my home. Seriously. Winging it is what 95% of us do because we're relationship and we are so good with people and I can figure it out. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of people that sell $20 million plus worth of real estate that wing it. The sad thing is they could be selling $40 million worth of real estate if they just would quit winging it. There's people that do 3 or 4 deals in their first year and get burned out and go, I don't know. And then they drop out of the business. They could be great producers in a year and a half or 2 years. They just winged it. I don't like winging it. You ever heard that old saying, on coming in on a wing and a prayer? It was a World War II euphemism that referred to a lot of the bombers in England that had lost one or either both of their engines on bombing runs into Germany. And the saying was essentially, they're winging it, meaning they had one wing's worth of engines and everything else was up to God as to whether or not that plane would land back safely on Allied soil. I don't want winging it, right? I don't want winging it for any of y'all because y'all's businesses depend on your ability to effectively communicate and deliver the proper information to the people that need the information. And you know, as a person that cares about each and every one of you, I want to make sure that you can do that in the best way possible to help you. So bear with me for everyone's favorite portion of the show when Richard fumbles through his screen to share. All right, now, so just a quick aside. I really want it to, I want this to be in the framework of a listing presentation from a lot of people's perspective, and don't worry about hammering out notes or this, that, or the other, because I'll share this with you as well as the recording. But like really a great listing presentation, the difference between a decent listing presentation and the difference between a great one is how much you can give in terms of value during the 30 minutes, hour and a half, whatever the time frame is that you're there at the seller's house or the office or whatever it might be. Now, ideally, the real listing presentation for me, and there's a lot of people that will say something otherwise, I think you need to have had at least 3 good conversations with a seller before you really get to the ability to have that listing presentation. Now, it could just be an initial thing, talking through, maybe we'll meet. I like to just uncover more. 2 conversations is fine, but I'm a measure twice, measure thrice, cut once kind of a person. I like to make sure that I've at least got all of the chips on the table, and I don't want to be surprised, because the only thing in this industry that kills deals really is surprises. So I like to eliminate surprises, at least as many of them as I can on the front end. And there's really 4 main pieces for a listing presentation to be successful. The first one is to build rapport with the seller. Now, I'm not talking about the whole, oh, that's a great, I see there's a fish on the wall. That's awesome. I really like to fish too. There was that one time that I went offshore and I got sick and I puked off the back of the boat, but it was really fun. And this day, it's not shooting the breeze, building of rapport. It's actually building a bridge between the two of you. Now, in however the way that manifests itself, it's really about being interested in the seller and their situation. It doesn't have to, they don't have to be like somebody that you have so much stuff in common with. It doesn't have to mean commonality. It means understanding. Really, rapport is understanding. That's where a mutual respect comes together. And that's in asking the real questions that will get to the heart of the issue and being honest with the seller about what it is that they want and helping understand why they want it, and then doing everything in your capacity to figuring out an option for them that could help accomplish at least the lion's share of those needs that they have. That brings you into uncovering the needs, like I said earlier, versus wants. It's real needs. And that's where really reviewing and evaluating what like their ideal result might be in their brain, looking at all the facts and then letting them really review and decide as to whether or not one of these options is a viable option for them to take going forward. And in some ways, like really, I'd come in, most of the time would come into a listing presentation. Sometimes even back when I was doing commercial real estate, sometimes I would have 3 or 4 listing presentations in a day. So I didn't have a whole lot of time to get through that day. And it just grew up out of happenstance. But I would walk in, sit down, and I would say, just listen, before we get started, I just want you to know that I value your time, and I am hopeful that you value my time in return, since you took the time to actually schedule an appointment with me today. How about this? If what I say doesn't make good business sense in the first 15 minutes, you have the point blank period, carte blanche to tell me to get out and go. I got 15 minutes, and if I can't do that, but if in that same time you think that it might be a good fit for us to work together, you have the ability to hire me on the spot, and we can get rolling. Does that sound good with you? To set the table at the start, and hey, listen, in 15 minutes, you can figure out a lot of things, but it also helps you if you're going to give yourself 15 minutes, you got to have it down, right? So that helps you get to the heart of the matter by asking questions, which helps accomplish the third piece, demonstrate value, not just we got this thing and we got the MLS and we got all this advertising and blah, 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 blah. That's reading off of a piece of paper. Yes, all of that stuff matters, but how it matters, what's important to the seller, what that stuff does, what I do on top of what the company does, on top of what everybody does. There's a difference there. There's value, and that value starts with a personal connection to the seller. And how you do that is you earn trust. What does earning trust mean, really? Is earning trust means that they'll be willing to work with you on the main points of objection, the timing of the listing, so an adequate time frame in which to sell the property, a proper price positioned within the marketplace, your fee, and then also the terms and conditions that are on their end in terms of the symbiotic relationship of the things that they need to get done in order to sell the house, whether it's do renovations, fix it up, whatever that might be. In order for them to work hand in hand with you, they have to trust you. So the first things first, and this could fall flat or not on y'all, and I hope that this rings properly. But the first thing is really do your homework, and I know that sounds stupid, but what I'm more or less talking about is it's remarkable to me how many folks go on a listing appointment and have not really adequately, not investigated, but done their studying on the person that they're actually meeting, right? Right now, today, who does not have a Facebook account, right? Or at least someone that you could at least learn something about that person that could help you better understand who they are, what they're all about, anything. Social media platforms, LinkedIn, anything. Even if you just Googled the person and learned a little bit more about them so that you are a little bit more in tune with who that person may or may not be. Now, if this person that's a potential seller that you've met and had some conversations with, and they're a real nice person, but you only talked to them over the phone, haven't ever met them, and all of a sudden you get there and they don't look anything like what you thought they were gonna, or that person's really nice on the phone, but just doesn't really want to give you anything. And then you look into what they do for a living, and all of a sudden they're a VP of an accountancy firm or something. And that's just the way that their personality is. Like, any little bits of information that you can learn about somebody helps you better understand that client or potential client. And it's not being creepy or anything. It's just knowing who you're dealing with, right? I mean, that's a personal safety piece, if nothing else. But it's also just doing your fair share of homework. Researching the property. I cannot tell you how many times people go into a listing, and this is shocking to me, that haven't researched the property history, the details of the property, learned about the neighborhood, the ins and outs, figured out if they have any friends that live in the neighborhood so they could make maybe a personal connection there. It's mind-boggling to me. At the very bare minimum, just know what's going in on, especially if you reach that commission objection or the pricing objection. We got to get X. Well, I'm curious, how'd you get to that? You know, from what I know, you paid $170 for it, and now you want $500. That's really interesting. So help me understand that. It just helps you have better conversations. If you don't have any information to share, you can't have a good conversation. You just stand there. And then you resort to the book, which the book is fine. I think the book is great, but your value is what's different. What it really helps you do is understand the people and how those people work and how they have conversations. The person that's going to be, a circuit court judge who is a high D driver. I'm not going to get off into personality profiles or anything, but the person that's a real driver is he's not going to embrace you being more emotional about what it would mean for them to move to a property. It's going to be diligence, reporting, facts. It's going to help you figure out how to have the conversation. It starts with researching the person, researching the property. And then when you get in there, try to understand the person. Now, I know that sounds non-real estate related, but everything about real estate is about people and understanding those people. And the fourth and final little bit here for this is prime the client for a yes, which essentially means what I would do before I would ever go on a listing presentation is I would pick in my brain the same exact thing. What's the worst case scenario that would happen? What's the most likely scenario? And what would be the best case scenario? And what do I need to do in order to at least get somewhere in between most likely and best case scenario? What do I need to do to help this person based on the information that I've already gathered, based on the homework that I've already done, based on the house? What would get us to at least the most likely scenario, at least, if not the best case scenario? And how you do that is just prime what you would feel like, at least what you would understand as the things that the client not wants to hear, but the things the client needs to hear. Again, we're separating needs from wants. So, and that's by design. And really the first question that you can really start with in order to prime the client for a yes and it's something that's going to save you guys a lot of time, the first question to ask is, I just need to, just to double check, you have to sell this house, right? Based on no other information, do you have to sell? Yes or no? And if the answer is yes, okay, that's perfect. Because if you didn't have to sell, I don't want to put you in a situation where you would feel compelled to sell when you really don't need to. Fair enough? Let's move on. That can save you guys a lot of time and a lot of frustration. And I know that, and I know that this may seem, I don't know, it may seem more psychobabble BS, but it really is. This is how you can connect with people, and that's the purpose of doing business with our clients, is to help them help themselves. But that's the hardest thing in the world for some people to do, right? We play real estate agent, but we're really psychologists, amateur psychologists at the end of the day. I kept saying how to be different. So what that really looks like is to know your client, really to feel, as hard as this sounds, to feel completely connected to, or at least totally invested in that person. As hard as that may seem, at least suspend disbelief and know your client, meaning know your client's personality, what they like, what they don't like. That's the difference. Have you ever been to a really great restaurant or a really great hotel, and you have this server or concierge or person that you make a connection with that really in a minute's notice kind of gets you, and you like them, you connect. Then if you see them for a couple of days in a row, all of a sudden they got you, right? And just like magic, all of a sudden things happen kind of the way that you like them to happen. Has anybody ever experienced that before? That's not by accident. Really, really, really great members of the service industry. And that's why bartenders and waitresses and, ironically enough, elementary school teachers really make great real estate agents, is because they can figure out what makes people tick in an instant, right? And now I'm not saying go try and reinvent the wheel and try and figure all that out, but it starts with empathizing and knowing that that's your person to serve, good or bad, and position yourself for little yeses. Now, how you position yourself for little yeses is to consistently ask questions designed to help that client. Now, there are the five best questions that I think you could ask rather, that I'll share with you in just a second. But for example, like I say that let's talk about a commission dispute for a second. And like what I said earlier, as a result, I provide all this service. As a result of that, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, my fee is 7%. That's all well and good that I could say that. The seller is more than likely going to be like 7%. I had this friend that said he could do it for 5%. I said, that's fantastic. I really, I got to tell you, my hat's off to that guy, because, if he does what I do for 5%, well, then I got to figure out how he cost cuts in other areas. And because, you do realize that my main objective is to sell your house for the most money. And if it goes down, that means that my commission is reduced as a result of that. Wouldn't you agree? That's just simple math. A small yes. Shortcuts up front for somebody are going to leave in your mind the question that potentially they might take shortcuts elsewhere. Wouldn't you agree? Little questions at the end change well, this is what I do, to here's what I do and why, and here's how it's worked in the past, would that be something that you would be interested in, is getting that result, not focusing on reduce your commission? And the third thing is always to show up mentally prepared for whatever's going to come. Now, I said about doing the best case scenario, middle case scenario, worst case scenario. It's really true. I mean, you show up mentally prepared to help the person, as opposed to, oh my gosh, I don't know what's going to happen. This guy was kind of a jackass to me on the phone the other day. I really don't know. I really hope I I really, really, really hope I win this listing. This house is so cute and da-da-da-da. Whatever it might be, turn that off and figure out how you can just focus on, I got a job to do. Wayne Gretzky, arguably one of the best hockey players in the history of hockey, never said that he skated to the puck. He always said that he skated to where the puck was going. And that's why he was able to be in a better position, because he's going where it's going. He's not going where it's at. Right? Showing up mentally prepared. And again, sales is a story. So what I said before about objection handling, oftentimes now, even if you're new, if, like, for example, Brandy, I'll speak to this. Lisa, I'll speak to this as well. Ashley, Tracy, not being there doesn't essentially afford you the ability to have stories to share, but you can get stories. You can help get other folks in the office to help tell you the story. Or even if you have one story, you know what? It's a good story. Or even in the past about how your commitment to whatever thing might have been helped create a positive outcome. And then you help create the client a new story. Being visual. That's why the marketing wheel really helps us be able to provide visual content. But also, even too, if you just had a legal pad and you drew a dollar bill and a sunshine or a tree or something, or a kid in a swing, and helped reiterate what the new story is for them to sell the home and be able to move into a different home in a visual sort of manner, that could go a long way into them actually understanding how committed you are to them and how empathetic you are to the situation that they're trying to change. This isn't about listing a house. It's about helping the people understand that the change they want to have happen is necessary and good for them now and in the future, but that you're the bridge between today and then. That's skating to the puck where it's going to be in the future, not where it is right now. And the case study plus a promise that's a next level deal, and you got to have a case study to start with. But more often than not, what you're going to be able to do is either, like I just said, leverage existing stories from other agents in the office, and even if it's in the doing your homework phase before you go on the listing presentation, talking with a couple of other people that are in the office and being like, listen, I got this X and Y client and he's a real pain in my butt and, really stuck on this price and this, that, and the other. Have you ever dealt with anything like that? And listen and see if they'll tell you a story and how it worked out the right way. Or somebody that wanted to cut commission and that you went in 2% higher than everybody else, but yet you did it, and then you actually still put more money in their pocket, which actually makes sense, as opposed to cutting your fee and getting less. See if you can get somebody to tell you a story. Or if you have a story, share that story of how, you know what, I really totally, I understand this. I empathize with this because I've dealt with several clients on similar situations that have been in the same shoes as you have been. And here's what happened. And here's what we did to work around this issue. And here's how we got things done and achieved a positive result for those clients. It's a story. We're not trying to make up stories. we're telling real stories about success so our clients can understand that we're in this for them and for their futures. So that 3 layers piece that I suggested for everybody. Now it really, quite honestly, that this comes in the middle, wherever it might need to fall. More than likely, you're just about to get to terms, but you may have a couple of different gaps in your agreement, correct? So really, and these come in the form of questions to the seller. Number one is, okay, so let's say we do exactly what you say you're going to do. We list it way the heck up here, and I do 5%. So I'm going to take the digital marketing away, and I'm probably not going to do circle prospecting. Probably not going to be able to leverage my neighborhood network just because I don't have enough time, and I don't have that in my marketing budget to be able to do that for what you want me to be able to take as a fee. What's the worst case scenario here? And let them lay that out. And okay, well, so let's say, why don't you say we meet in the middle? So that's probably the most likely scenario. What happens then? And then what'll probably happen is a lot of gripes and complaints from the worst case scenario will go a little bit away in the most likely scenario. And then say, well, what if? Just take me at my word here, because it feels like you and I are almost on the same page, but we're not quite on the same page. If, for example, I put to work and leveraged a network and a superior marketing platform and my excellent personal work to go do exactly what it is that I do for my clients, I fight for them, we do everything, and we kind of play ball on my terms, what would be the best case scenario for you? And more than likely, it's going to be like, well, then we can get both of the kids out of that little bedroom, and then we could actually have a backyard because that dog is chewing up all the furniture, and I could be in a better position to commute to my work, and and then we get all those things. Okay, well, why don't we try and get that? At that point, it just becomes a no-brainer, right? If you can say, listen, what's the best case scenario? You get all these things. If you let me do everything in my power, I'm going to do everything that I can to achieve the best case scenario. The final thing is these 5 questions that I've been talking about. And really, they are as universal as it could possibly be. But I find that really the main objective in any conversation with a client is really to just maintain the control of the direction of the conversation, which really means he who asks the most questions or she who asks the most questions has the power in a conversation. And it's not about lording over the person you're having a conversation with. It's about really helping to guide the conversation and not go down into deep, dark holes at points in time. It's to help keep everything up in the light, up in the where we can actually help with. So the first 2 really is what I've already gone over. What is your understanding of? And what is your experience with? So both of these handle both of the objections that we discussed earlier with Lindsay and with Brandy about commissions and with pricing objections. And it's not, again, it's not an end all be all. It's not going to just cut the question off at its head. It's just an ability for you to then go down the route of, well, then why exactly is it that you're doing this, as opposed to what I'm proposing in our listing presentation to get your home sold for the most amount of money, least amount of time, and the least amount of worry, right? The next 2 are a little bit different, and it pertains again to the same exact thing because the objections don't change. but it is tailored to the people that you're dealing with. Again, like I said, the hard charging district attorney is probably not going to be real forthcoming with you about, well, let's say we list up here and this thing sits on the market and you get an offer that's 20% below the listing price. How would you feel if that scenario played itself out? They're more than likely just gonna be like, well, I'm gonna be pissed. So it's that you have to know your audience, but these 5 questions can really help you move the conversation forward, right? Really what we're trying to do is open doors, not close them off. How would you feel if that scenario played itself out? Or let's say the best case scenario happens. How would you feel if I were able to get you the net amount and I help you understand, well, really what's your understanding of home sales and home value and exactly what the price plus the fee that charged for service, what that actually puts in your pocket at the end of the day? Would it be a helpful exercise for you, for us to figure out, one, the amount of equity that you have in your home, which if you've done your homework, you're going to probably have a little back of the envelope piece where you actually have the amount of equity that they've got in their house, plus, or at least a decent ballpark, plus the sale price, any other incidentals for closing, the commission's already backed out, and say, okay, here's what happens in your pocket at X price. Here's what happens in your pocket at Y price. And if you've got the digital capability, you could even have a little seller net spreadsheet that you could tag along with that's already preloaded. And you can say, well, here's what this looks like when it changes for you. So how would you feel if we were to then say, do this and get you exactly what we're thinking about putting in your pocket? Or, let's say we could hypothetically sell your house in 6 months, but then you want to start it here, you got to get out. Well, what happens next? And then all of a sudden the house is vacant and you're carrying 2 mortgages, paying property tax on 2 different properties. Well, what happens next? And then finally, could it be possible? Could it be possible is extremely open-ended, and it can apply to anything. And the way that it works from my perspective, the way that I've posed that question in the past is more, could it be possible that we're missing something here? Or could it be possible that X prior experience might not necessarily apply in this situation? Or could it be possible that the reason why we're stuck on X, Y, or Z is actually due to some other external factor that's holding you up from getting your home sold in the proper way? Could it be possible? Or could it be possible that we're missing something as a follow-up to that? Again, that relates to the homework piece. I cannot stress enough that the times that I've been most nervous and the times that I've really screwed up, because I've done it a bunch, have been due to not being prepared 100% for the people that I'm about to deal with and the property involved. I mean, I could have all the nuts and bolts of tax map data and this, that, and the other, and I could go in there guns a-blazing. If I'm not prepared to deal with the people that I'm going to face, I'm going to have a rough ride. And it's really all about trying to make it as smooth of a ride as possible, right? And I also give myself 15 minutes, so if I screw up in dramatic fashion, I've only got 15 minutes, which is something that I have definitely not done with you guys. I've taken up way more of your time. But what I will do is, while I've still got most of you still on the line, is there anything that you guys want to have accomplished or discussed that we haven't already? Or is there another thing that you guys would like to roll through in terms of question and answer or anything at all, really?
Richard, this is a comment. I don't know if everybody knows, and this goes back to the safety part, and it's more for buyers than sellers, but it's worked both ways for me. There's the Forewarn app that GGAR provides to us that's free, which gives you just information as far as you can go and look and see if there's criminal records or liens, things like that, verifying addresses. So I've used it a few times. It's free to download if people haven't. It's great buyers and sellers.
And what was the name of the app, Lindsay?
Forewarn.
Here, I'll put it in the chat.
That's an excellent point, Lindsay. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure. And just one other comment or tip that I've learned along the way too, at the end of a listing appointment, depending on how it's going, I've turned it around and said to the sellers, and it kind of shows that you're taking control. You know, you want to know where they are with things. Why wouldn't you hire me, or why wouldn't you have me be your realtor? And put them on the spot. Don't say anything else. And that has also been kind of a game changer in some situations. So I've used it in interviews too. It's fun to watch, if nothing else, people's faces because they don't expect it.
100%. And it kind of goes hand in hand with, you know, if at any time in this first 15 minutes that none of this makes any business sense to you, you got the permission to tell me to walk out the door, right? I mean, how many people are going to say 15 minutes is up, go? Interestingly enough, I've had that happen twice. So it has backfired on me more than once, but you know, that's a great point, Lindsay. And I think that just really at the end of the day, it's about showcasing what we have to offer, doing our best to connect on a personal level and on an empathetic level with the seller. And then also just too, letting them know that they're the ones that are driving the boat. But if any of it doesn't make sense, well, tell me why it didn't make sense. Right.
Yeah. Might I chime in on for a second?
You got it, Ash. I almost called you Ashley for crying out loud because you got your wife's computer. Sheesh.
Tomorrow is mine and her anniversary, so we're. No, I was just my beautiful wife. But anyway,
Happy
I was just
anniversary.
Thank you. She's a lucky lady. I keep telling her that she doesn't believe me, but anyway, the answer, not the answer, but what I kind of do when I do a presentation is like on the intro, say if I answer all of your questions and you're like everything that you hear, what would stop us from doing business today? Yeah, that's what you're saying, but I kind of do it in the intro, and then when I get to the end, address if there's any questions that they have or something like that, then address them and then just say, okay, why can't we do business? And I totally agree with what you're saying. I just kind of do it on the intro, and then on the back side of things, when wrapping up, you say, okay, have I answered all your questions, yes or no? And they say no, then address them. If they say yes, then okay, well, you told me earlier if we could do business, like everything that you hear. So what's stopping us? Just, I mean, I different way of doing it, but I totally agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, and another thing too that, you know, it's interesting. It may be kind of hokey, but what in terms of like the intro piece, Tracy, like what you were talking about, is I've always gone in and well, not always, but I'll go in and talk and introduce kind of like what basically talk about what we're going to talk about, then talk about it, and then talk about what we just talked about and ask if all of that makes sense. So I know that just sounds like gobbledygook, but one, talk about what we're going to talk about. So basically framing the conversation. Two, then actually talk about the stuff. And then three, talk about what we already just talked about and make sure that there is no need for clarification. And at each point in that conversation, asking follow-up questions. Like I said, there's little yes answers, little inconsequential yeses. More often than not, it's, does that make sense to you? Or would that be something you're looking for? Or is this the type of result that you might need to help you do XYZ, whatever it might be from the past? But in the beginning, when you're laying out kind of what we're going to talk about, first starting and stating that, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, really my intention today is to help you understand a couple of key things. And one is I really want to understand a little bit more clear. I think I'm pretty close on it, but I want to understand a little bit more clearly, really your main motivation and your main reasons for wanting to sell your home, which you do have to sell your home, right? Asking that question, the little yes. Then two, I want to really lay out for you where your home sits in the marketplace right now as it relates to buyers and sellers, help you understand where your home is positioned right now and how we could best position it in the marketplace to stand out from the competition. And then three, lay out what my plan is to sell this home. And as soon as we're done, you can hire me immediately and go forward and accomplish the goals. Does that make sense to you? So now really more than anything, it's, and sometimes I've said, and as soon as you hire me at the end of this situation, we can get going immediately. It's more or less dropping in when you hire me, when we're done with this, because I'm going to tell you what your real motivation is. We're going to uncover that. We're going to make sure that's good. We're going to figure out where your home's positioned in the marketplace, and we're going to put it in its best light so it can stand out from the competition. And three, we're going to lay out the plan to sell the home. Once we're done with that, you can hire me and I'll get to work immediately. Sound good? And a lot of the times you're going to get people who, or whatever, but more often than not, people are not even going to react to that. They're going to, yeah, I guess that makes sense. And then you can go from there. I love it both ways. And again, it's what your personality jives with, right? That's it. Lindsay's point is fantastic. I love the way that you sort of set everything out there on the table to start with. It's all about really practicing and doing your homework and knowing that connection is the main focus of this. It's connecting with the person, knowing that on the other end of the table, on the other end of this call, there are human beings there and they've all got a right to their opinions, but it's for us to be curious to understand why their opinions lie where they are. And the more informed we are, the better we are doing our job. Okay, guys, I've kept you too long. Thank you so very, very, very much. I really appreciate it, y'all.
Thank you, Richard. This was really helpful.
Have a great rest of your day. I'll share you guys the slides and the recording as soon as it all gets uploaded, okay?
Thank you. Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care.